Hey, it's David Smith. True crime is the most popular podcast genre, and we have one of the best here at Frequency Podcast Network. Two of our journalists, Phil Martino and Madison Fitzpatrick, host Tracking a Killer, and they just released Season 3. Their goal is to shine a light on cold cases with the hope of helping find the killers to give these families some resolution and hopefully some peace. We want to shine a light on these episodes to revisit some of these cases. You can listen to other episodes of Tracking a Killer on the Seeker app or your favorite podcast platform. Thanks to Phil and to Madison for doing this important work, and thank you for listening.
Both his mouth and nose were taped up, probably trying to send some sort of message. So he ended up dying asphyxiation.
I told her I wanted to see Patrick, but she told me that Patrick is dead.
Whatever individual or individuals, probably more than one, were laying in wait for him.
And I asked God why someone would hurt my son.
This is Tracking a Killer, the Cold Case Files.
I'm Phil Martino.
And I'm Madison Fitzpatrick.
We're two journalists from Toronto, Canada, who have covered many crime stories over the years, but we're most interested in cold cases and getting them solved.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to talk about here, Phil, is that we don't just talk about these cases. We don't just spit cases out to each other and say, hey, let's cover this one. This is really famous. Let's just talk and speculate about what could have happened and things like that. We actually do our due diligence as journalists. And what does that look like, Phil?
So we like to speak to the police, the investigator working on the case, maybe a past investigator who's worked on the case.
Because some of them are older.
Some are much older, decades older. And we like to speak to the family. We want to get a picture of who the victim was. And then we want to get their side. What happened? What do you think happened? Obviously, we want to deal with the facts. But for me, it's important to get a picture of who the victim was.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we've dealt with cases that are decades old and we don't have those family members around, but we still want to talk to detectives about the facts and possibly about what their connection to the victim's family was at the time that they were investigating the case.
So in this particular case, we were able to speak to the family members and to the investigator on the case.
Yeah. So in this segment, we're looking into the unsolved murder of 21-year-old Patrick Santos. He's from the Scarborough area of Toronto, and he was killed back in 2006, and still there have been no arrests in this case.
Madison, this is heartbreaking, this case. The mother, she's devastated to this day. She says Patrick worked hard and he had dreams of becoming a police officer, but it was just never meant to be.
Here is our look at the Patrick Santos case. "21-year-old Patrick Santos' body was found in the backyard of his father's home in Scarborough on September 17, 2006.
Police say his feet and hands were bound and tape was wrapped around his head. They also say he had been beaten and suffocated.
Patrick's mother, Juliet, says they've carried this for more than 15 years already, and it's time to make those people pay the price for taking her son's life.
Juliet says her son was a quiet and funny man.
To tell you about Patrick, he was quiet, ambitious, and funny, and he's a driven entrepreneur who wanted to make more of himself and leave his mark in the world. And he went to school. That was his dream, to become a law enforcement at Humber College in 2003. Unfortunately, I was laid off at Bell in 2003, 2004. So he told me that he wanted to help me and focus on working, find a job and work temporarily and save some money for his school. he was approved for fund for approximately $500 at Hamburg College, but at that time, because I was laid off, so I cannot afford to help him with the school. In 2004, I helped him enroll at Sheridan College for a fire department officer. So we went for a fire to take some. He took some courses at Sheridan, but for somehow he discontinued, and I was able to help get back a refund from Sheridan College. And then from there, he went to work as an auto mechanic, and he did some auto detailing at the auto shop, and he did the flea market because he wanted to save some money for his school.
Ultimately, he wanted to be a police officer? Is that what he wanted to be?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I can show you his papers that when he wanted to enroll at law enforcement at Hamburg College. He even went to the Peel Police. They have an event when he was 17 years old, 18. Can't remember that. And I brought him to the police event. And he loves, he tried the police uniform. And it was funny that, he loves it. His dream is to become a police officer. And in late 2005, was around Christmas. And then on February 2006, he asked me to give him a check to help him enroll for the security guard. And that's what it bothers me, because, why do you want to become a security guard? So he said, I have a chance to get into the law enforcement. If I have to become a security guard, I can continue and, maybe someday I will become a law enforcement. And that was the reason why it hurts me. He's got so many dreams.
Toronto Police Detective Stella Karras is working on the Patrick Santos case.
Well, Patrick Santos was residing with his father. His mother was in a different address at the time. And, he was working as a mechanic. And there's not that much to say about him. He's 21 years old. He had a girlfriend. He was just sort of trying to, I guess, make his way, sort of get himself established. He was still living with Dad.
So let's talk about the situation, what happened that night.
So that night he was out with friends, he was at a club, is the last that we had heard. He was out at a club, and he had called his girlfriend roughly around, let's say it was 4:30 in the morning, that he's coming back from the club, and that was pretty much it. Girlfriend thought everything is fine, and he wasn't seen until about 7 o'clock in the morning, 7:20ish in the morning roughly, when his dad wakes up and sees his son, unfortunately, outside on their deck in the backyard, bound by tape and ties. He tends to him as quickly as he can. His grandmother comes, who's also at the home, starts unbinding him. He's unresponsive. They call 911. And he was obviously deceased by the time paramedics arrived. So 1 minute he's leaving a club, and the next minute he's found beaten up. Rather, there was evidence that he was beaten up, and he was bound and left in his backyard. We believe that he did make it home because his car was in the driveway, and we believe that whatever individual or individuals, probably more than one, were laying in wait for him and did what they did, either probably trying to send some sort of message to whomever.
So was the official cause of death asphyxiation from being bound?
So there was tape used, and his ankles were taped, his wrists were taped together, and his head was taped as well, to the point where his nose and his mouth were covered, which obviously you're not going to be able to breathe. So he ended up dying asphyxiation because of the fact that he was both his mouth and nose were taped up.
Was there a possibility that this was just a scare tactic and whoever did this didn't mean to kill him?
It is a possibility. It is a possibility for sure. I mean, it could have been, it could have been sending a message and they just sort of wanted to keep him alive, but, they beat him up and they did this and didn't realize that if they do the nose and the mouth as well, this is going to result in death. Or it could have been intentional, and his death would send a message to somebody else that's still living. We can't tell for sure at this point, but that was definitely a possibility.
Patrick's mother says she turned on the news and saw a headline that read, "Body found in a backyard."
And it bothers me. Why is it I'm feeling like it's something Bellamy and Bellamy, and it triggers me that I start to worry, but maybe I'm just thinking maybe that's not something. It's not possible. That could not be. And then because I left my cell turned on all night, but in ringer off, it was in my jacket's pocket. So when I looked at it, there was a message on my phone. That was around 10 o'clock in the morning. So when I checked the voicemail, it was Lunila Santos, which is Reynaldo's half-sister, left the voicemail and said, she said that, please call me, something very bad happened to Patrick. And the police are at Reynaldo's house, Ray, which is Patrick's biological father. I started to tremble and worried, and then I asked Nina, I'm sorry, I don't want to get through this because it really hurts. That I told her I wanted to see Patrick, but she told me that Patrick is dead. So that's my entire body, I had the goosebumps and I fell down. I fell down on the floor, crying and yelling and sobbing, and I asked God why someone would hurt my son. My son is so kind and helpful to everyone. I'm sorry. I remember my heart just I felt like it pulled out. That I had difficulty breathing at that time. I was angry. Whoever did this to my son.
Juliet and her husband, who spoke to us as well, say they cannot believe no one heard a thing, not even the dog at the house.
The path to the backyard of the house and the path leading to the entrance to the basement apartment, it used to run along the west side of the house, facing the street, facing the street lights would have been visible from that side of the house. It would have been, like I said, it was more well lit, and for whatever the reason, in the month, maybe it was just maybe it was redecorating. I don't know, but the pathway was diverted so that you couldn't get to the basement apartment through the west side of the house, and instead you had to traverse the driveway along the east side of the house, which would have been in the darkness, and there was a tiny space between the camper trailer that Patrick would have had to have gone through this narrow, dark pathway to the back of the house versus along the east side versus the original west side, which would have been more well lit. We found it really unusual. Like, we have a dog as well, and our dog a small dog, but I can contest that any noise that he hears in the middle of the night, he starts barking and growling and trying to alert us that there's something going on, and that we found it unusual that their dog was totally unresponsive. So just an item that seems unusual. I guess just is what we want to maybe. And
then the clay is according to Reynaldo, they didn't hear any commotion at all. But remember this: around 3 o'clock, the grandmother heard the phone ring. She answered the phone. No one answered the phone. Hung up. That's around 3 o'clock. So that means that someone is awake.
Detective Karras says police had no solid leads at the time.
So you mentioned tape. Were there any fingerprints on this tape that could lead you to any suspects?
Well, without going into too much specifics, we do have a DNA profile that we believe is the offender, can be the offender in this case. But for years, it wasn't hitting on anything. It wasn't bringing us to any individual. And so I can say that in Patrick Santos, we have just started the process of uploading that profile into the genetic databases to see if we can find some familial line to try and determine who this belongs to.
Did Patrick Santos have any enemies?
Not that anybody could say for sure. There wasn't anybody that was pointed out, like, this guy's threatened him or this group of individuals threatened him. No solid leads, unfortunately, for Patrick. No solid leads. But we do have that DNA, and we're hopeful that we can get a lead through the genetic genealogy route.
So Patrick was beaten, bound, tied up in the backyard. Did his father in the house not hear anything? Did neighbors not hear anything?
No, from the canvassing, the extensive canvassing that officers did, nobody heard anything. He might have been, for example, a tape might have been put over his mouth so he can't scream for help, and they're beating him up. He can't make much noise. It is the winter. Well, it's getting cooler, so there's not much that windows are going to be open in September. But yeah, nobody recalls seeing anything suspicious or hearing anything suspicious. It was very, very sad and bizarre that the last known contact is he's talking to his girlfriend at roughly 4:30 in the morning, and then 3 hours later, his dad finds him in his backyard.
So you mentioned the girlfriend. Did she have any ideas of who might have done this?
Nothing, no solid leads. I mean, of course, she was interviewed. We looked at her phone records, his phone records, and we don't have anything solid. Let's put it this way. I can't say that investigators never found anything suspicious, but it's not anything solid, and it certainly didn't lead us to anybody that we could elevate to a suspect level.
Now, there is a reward for this case. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, there's a reward of $50,000 that the Toronto Police put up for any tips that can lead to an arrest in this case. So hopefully somebody will have some information that can help us reinvigorate this investigation and find our perpetrator or perpetrators.
Juliet's husband says it's a matter of reopening your mind to everything.
My view of what needs to happen next is when you have a cold case that's been unsolved this long, you have to put aside all your assumptions that you made to date and you say, okay, let's start from square one. What do we know about the people that are in immediate contact with Patrick, or what is it? Let's review the events that happened and try to step through what can we make sense of this. Whoever you dismissed as being suspects, reopen it. Be it people at Patrick's work, be it people that he was dealing with at the flea market where he sold things on a weekend, be it everyone that had a more direct personal connection with Patrick. Reopen it and just say, okay, we dismissed him as this person, it's impossible, it's irrelevant. Fine, reopen it up. And I realize that means fine, open it up to us. I guess that makes us the suspects, but eliminated us appropriately. I guess I know I can say that was later on in the year. We were living in Markham. I brought the trash to the street side and went back in the house to bring recycle out. And the next thing I know, when I come out, our trash bag is gone. And I'm looking down the street, no other trash bag. Every other person's trash is still sitting on their curbside. So I can only assume fine. Police services came to our house, picked up our garbage, tried to get DNA samples from us. They got their DNA samples, and I'm assuming we were eliminated as suspects. Fine. I'm okay with that. It's just be that thorough. And going back to what Juliet said, that I believe Detective Burke, Detective Sergeant Burke, the original investigating officer, he reiterated over and over again, we have 3 persons of interest. This is what we really, really believe are the potential suspects in this case. And now, with all the time that's progressed, my understanding is that they've been able to obtain it's obscure amounts of DNA, but they have faint DNA samples from Patrick's case. They have what's so-called mitochondrial DNA sample, which they can then use to try to trace down the ancestry of the mother. And okay, if that's fine, and if you have 3 suspects, you know what? Put 3 undercover officers. I know it's expensive, but Toronto Police Services, what's your annual budget nowadays? $1 billion a year? Take some part of that $1 billion. Take $100,000, pay 3 officers, salary for 3 months to go undercover, follow these people. They go to a restaurant, you walk into that restaurant and just say that, okay, did this come from table so-and-so? Yes, I need that cup. Take it to the office and get the DNA sample off that cup. Do whatever you need to do. They put their garbage on the street side, you go pick it up off the street one day and just go through it, rummage through it and get your DNA samples. Do what needs to be done. Except this is solvable. That was the comment that the other police officers, homicide officers have said. This is a solvable case. There is probably at least, the theory is it's just a close, that Patrick was assaulted in the backyard. Patrick was a big, powerful man. Okay, one person could not, possibly one hit with a baseball bat or something might have done something to him. I guess I can say that because at his funeral, I could see he had a huge welt on his head, bruise from wherever he was, initially hit. But he is not a man that would have just fallen down. It would have taken more than one person, and I believe this was a conspiracy to go after Patrick. 2 or more people killed him. So fine, go sit on these people's front yard when it's trash collection day, or go through their recycle. If there's a pop can in there, maybe they drank straight from that pop can, take the pop can out of the recycle bin. But it's going to take effort and manpower to do this, or just resources, bodies. Put some money into it. My wife is broken. I can't tell you the countless nights that we've had discussions at 3 a.m. in the morning discussing this theory, discussing that theory, discussing what happened, the anguish, the tears. I can't express, how broken my wife has become as a result of this. She's struggled to move on. I do believe that the right officers are working on Patrick's case right now, and I trust and believe that somewhere in this lifetime, an arrest will be made. But as I said, it's the frustration that here it is 17 years later, and we're still waiting on a result.
Patrick's mother says until those responsible for her son's life are brought to justice, they cannot have peace or truly move forward with their lives.
Do you believe that this case can be solved?
Yes. They have to go and investigate again, right from the beginning.
Police are asking anyone with information about this case to reach out to them.
You can also contact Crime Stoppers with any tips anonymously.
If you know something, say something.
You've been listening to Tracking a Killer, the Cold Case Files. I'm Madison Fitzpatrick.
And I'm Phil Martino. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to a special edition of Tracking a Killer, the Cold Case Files, on The Big Story. I'm David Smith. Thanks for listening.